Hello Year 10 mathematicians. Just going to continue with Unit 5 Shape and Space. Another two geometric transformations that are different to the translations one we did last time. Translation was just moving the object left, right, up or down, but not actually changing its orientation. The two we're going to do today you probably would have done before, reflections and rotations. So the main objective is to perform the other geometrical transformations, reflections and rotations, and let's define in the maths context what a reflection is. So a reflection mirrors an object along a mirror line. So the image of the object is the same distance but the other side of the mirror line. So if you've got an object which is 1 square to the left of a mirror line, it gets reflected, so it's 1 square to the right of the mirror line. Rotation spins an object around a pivot point or center point. And that's pretty much it. Now, the instructions for these two types of transformation are very specific. For a reflection, you need to be given a mirror line. Okay, so you are given a mirror line, and the mirror line could be in the form y is equal to mx plus c. It could be something like x equals 5, y equals 2. They could just say x-axis, they could just say y-axis, but it will be a straight line guaranteed. Only one instruction. For rotation there are 3 instructions. Okay, they need to give you an angle. It could be 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, 45 degrees, etc. They need to give you a direction. What I mean by that is anti-clockwise or clockwise. So clockwise or anti-clockwise. And they need to give you a center of rotation, which is a fancy word for the pivot point, what everything spins around. So the rotation is probably the hardest one because there's three different instructions. Right, let's see what a question would look like. Okay, so for EG number 1, I'm going to rotate this object anti-clockwise 90 degrees about 1 minus 1. And the key first step with a rotation is to label the center of rotation. Okay, that center is our pivot point. 1 minus 1 is there. And then if you're in an exam, you'd actually be expected to use tracing paper to complete this question, but it's unlikely that you have your own tracing paper. So one solution is find some clear plastic. I've got this, cut this from a clear plastic folder I no longer use. This is going to act as my tracing paper. You place it over the diagram, draw over the bits that you want. Key thing is the actual object, and the other key point is the pivot point. Now for the pivot point, it's really important that you use the plus sign rather than the dot So I'm using a plus sign because when I perform the rotation, because I'm always performing in multiples of 90 degrees, it's easier for me to keep track of 90 degrees, 180, 270, etc. So rotating anti-clockwise 90 degrees. So I keep that pivot point fixed, rotate to the left 1 right angle, and it finishes there. And then I need to draw that image on the other side. So we've got some corners at -1, -1, -1, 1, and -4, -1. So -1, those would be my 4 corners, and that's my object, and that's part A. Okay, really important that you use the plus sign. Next one is reflect in the line y is equal to 0. Similar to the one above, the first thing you should do is label the mirror line for this one. So y is equal to 0 is the line which passes through y is equal to 0, and it would be effectively the x-axis. So I'm going to draw in the mirror line. And then pick on the points, on the corner points again, similar to translations, and then reflect them the other side of the mirror line. Now if you've got a diagonal line, it's good to rotate your page so it's either horizontal or vertical, but this is a horizontal line and this is quite straightforward. So this point gets reflected down there, this point gets reflected down there, and that point up there is currently 4 away, so it gets reflected 4 away in the opposite direction, and you end up with that as your image, which I'll call part B. So the exam tips I can give you for this would be, firstly, always label or draw in the point of rotation, that pivot point, so the center of rotation, or the mirror line. And second exam tip would be, if you're asked to describe one of these transformations, make sure you include all of the instructions. Okay, so include all of the instructions when doing like the reverse question. Okay, so when describing the transformation. What I mean by that is, when we did translations before, the instruction was a vector. You have to write that down if you were describing a translation. For today, if I asked you to do a reflection, you have to include the mirror line in your description. And for rotation, there's 3 bits of information. You've got to include the angle, the direction, and also the pivot point or the center of rotation. The questions I'd like you to complete: exercise 2 star, which starts on page 343. And just do the evens. Now, if you are going to do these correctly, you have to make sure your scale is perfectly equal in both directions. If you don't do this, the rotations won't work. Okay, so what I mean by that is, if you are using your book, do 1 little square's worth 1 going in both directions, you're fine. If you're using lined paper like I have, I've made sure that the scale on the bottom is identical to the scale going up. So the 1 little square for me is the same distance in both directions. If you don't do that, then you will perform the rotations incorrectly. And that's it.